The cream paper of the Academy envelope crackled in Adrian Vale's hand, sharp and dry in the quiet room, while the smell of cold rain drifted in through the half-open window. Theo stood across from his father, shoulders tight, and listened as the man pointed to the seal and said, very calmly, "You either accept your place tonight, or you leave this house tonight." He was the bridge engineer people spoke about with respect, the kind of man whose work outlived him in steel, stone, and traffic moving safely over water. In his mind, Theo was supposed to continue that line. Theo swallowed. His throat felt dry. "I'm not going to the academy," he said. Adrian's face didn't change at first, and somehow that was worse. "Then what are you doing?" Theo heard his own heartbeat. He could smell varnished wood, old paper, the faint smoke from the fireplace that had gone out an hour before. And then he said the one thing that made his father look at him like a stranger. "I want to make perfume." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adrian gave one short laugh with no warmth in it. "Perfume? After everything I built? After everything your mother and I wanted for you?" Theo's hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "This is what I love." Adrian set the envelope down with terrible care. "No," he said, "this is what embarrasses me." And when Theo finally turned toward the door, carrying only one small bag, he could feel the weight of one secret object in his coat pocket, the thing that had started all of this years before. If this story pulls at your heart, subscribe and stay with me. That small thing in Theo's pocket had been with him for years. He was 9 when his mother died, and after the funeral, the house changed faster than a child could understand. One day there had been her scarves over the chair, her soft laugh in the hallway, the faint trace of hand cream on the teacup she used every morning. Then, little by little, it was all gone. Drawers emptied, her dresses vanished from the closet. Even the pillow on her side of the bed stopped carrying her scent. Adrian did it quietly, with the cold discipline he used on everything that hurt him. He told himself he was keeping the house in order. He told himself it was better this way. But to Theo, it felt like losing her twice. A few nights later, unable to sleep, the boy wandered barefoot into the bathroom. The tile was cold under his feet. He opened the cabinet just to touch something that had belonged to her. And there, pushed behind folded towels and medicine bottles, he found a small glass jar with a white lid. Orange blossom. He twisted it open and the smell rose at once, soft, bright, a little creamy, a little green, warm as skin. His chest tightened. For one impossible second, it felt as if she had just stepped out of the next room. From that night on, he kept the jar hidden in a box beneath his bed. He would open it in secret and breathe slowly, trying to hold on to what was fading. And after a while, he began to notice something strange. The scent was not just one scent. There was something inside it he couldn't name yet. One quiet note deep underneath, like the missing a chord in a song he almost remembered. That question stayed with him for years. Theo began opening the jar less like a child clinging to comfort and more like someone trying to solve a puzzle. He would sit by the bedroom window in the late afternoon when the light turned pale gold on the floorboards and breathe in carefully. First came the soft brightness he already knew, then the creaminess, then something green, almost crushed leaf sharp. And under all of that, something warm and quiet he could never quite catch. He started noticing other things too. The smell of rain on concrete was different from rain on old wood. Fresh paper smelled dry and faintly sweet, while Adrian's rolled blueprints carried dust, graphite, and his father's cologne. In the laundry room, soap changed once it touched cotton. In the garden, flowers smelled different in sun than they did after dusk. Theo did not have words for any of this yet, but he had attention, and attention in a life like his became its own refuge. As he got older, Adrian took his silence for agreement. Good marks in school only encouraged him. If Theo solved equations quickly, his father saw destiny. If he spent too long with his nose in the air near a hedge or a cupboard, Adrian barely noticed. To him, talent had one proper road, and that road led straight to steal, load, span, weight. But now and then, Claire came back to Theo in the smallest ways. On winter scarves pulled from storage. On old stationery in the back of a drawer. On the collar of a coat no one had worn in years. He began to understand something that frightened him a little. A person could disappear from a room and still remain in the air. And one afternoon, in a quiet shop filled with glass bottles and paper strips, someone finally caught him standing still with his eyes closed. The voice behind him was low, rough, and precise. If you're going to stand there with your eyes closed, at least tell me what you think you're smelling. Theo opened his eyes fast. The shop was narrow and dim, lined with amber bottles that caught the late light like old honey. The air was thick with powder, wood, citrus peel, and something darker underneath. Behind the counter stood a woman in a charcoal dress, silver hair pinned back, one hand resting on the glass, as if she owned not just the place, but the silence inside it. He cleared his throat. "Orange first," he said, "but not only orange. Something green, dry paper, iris maybe, and a resin in the back." The woman's face did not soften. "Maybe?" Theo looked at the paper strip again. "Not maybe," he said, quieter now. "I'm sure about the resin." She studied him for a long moment. Most people say they like a scent or they don't. You're pulling it apart. He didn't know whether that was praise. "I just notice things." At that, she gave a strange little smile, almost hidden. "That is not a little thing." Her name was Evelyn March, though Theo had heard it only in passing before then, always with a lowered voice. People said she had once built a perfume house collectors still talked about. People also said she no longer worked with the public much. Some said she was difficult. Some said she had become a ghost in her own trade. She slid 3 new blotters across the counter. "Smell these." Theo did. Then she asked him to compare them. And when he finished, Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the glass. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Before noon." He stared at her. "Why?" This time, her answer came without a smile at all. "Because I need to know if your nose is real." He did come back the next day, though he barely slept. The shop was quieter in the morning. Dust floated in the thin light, and the place smelled cooler than it had the evening before. Less warm resin, more clean alcohol, paper, and polished wood. Evelyn was already waiting. She said nothing at first. She simply led Theo past the front room, through a narrow hallway, and into a workroom lined with drawers, scales, stoppered bottles, and stained notebooks. It was the first time he had seen where scents were built. "Sit," she said. On the table were small strips, dark glass vials, and a wooden box with numbered compartments. She placed one strip under his nose. "Don't impress me, just answer." Theo inhaled. Bitter peel, dry leaves, something floral, but only a shadow. Then another, sharp at first, then soft. Then one that carried a faint sweetness over something almost smoky. Evelyn changed the order, mixed distances, asked what stayed on the paper and what disappeared fast. More than once, she corrected him with one lifted eyebrow, and more than once, she said nothing at all, which made him even more nervous. After nearly an hour, she leaned back. "You're untrained," she said. Theo looked down. "I know. But your perfumer's organ is unusually clear." He looked up at that, startled by the phrase. Evelyn moved toward the window. "Do you know what happened to my nose?" He shook his head. "I lost most of it years ago," she said. "Not memory, not judgment. Smell." The room seemed to go still. Then she turned to him fully and asked the question that made his pulse jump. "If I put materials in front of you," she said, "could you become mine?" Theo did not answer right away. The question hung in the room with the sting of alcohol and crushed petals. He looked at Evelyn, at the rows of labeled bottles behind her, at the notebooks worn soft at the corners by years of use. "I don't know how," he said at last. "Good," she replied. "People who think they already know are useless to me." She walked back to the table and closed the wooden box with a quiet click. Then she explained it plainly. Her nose had failed her years ago, not all at once, but enough to end the kind of work that had built her name. She could still remember structures, balance, tension, what a fragrance should do as it opened and faded, but she could no longer trust her own senses to finish what her mind began. "I need honesty more than talent," she said. "If something is harsh, you say harsh. If it collapses after 10 minutes, you say so. No flattery." Theo nodded, still trying to understand that this was real. Evelyn studied him again. "And if you work here, you do not play at this. You clean, you sort, you learn materials, you ruin paper strips, you make mistakes, and you come back the next day anyway." That part, strangely, made him breathe easier. For the first time, what he loved sounded less like a dream and more like a discipline. When he returned home that evening, the house smelled of ironed shirts and Adrian's cologne. His father was at the long table with academy papers spread in perfect lines. He didn't look up at first. "Where were you?" Adrian asked. Theo still had resin and citrus on his hands. And for the first time, instead of hiding it, he told the truth. The truth landed badly. Adrian looked up slowly, as if he had misheard him. The room was bright under the hanging lamp, every page on the table squared to the edge, every pencil lined beside the academy forms. Theo stood there with his coat still on, carrying that faint trail of citrus and resin into a house that preferred starch, ink, and silence. "A perfume shop?" Adrian said. "It's more than a shop," Theo answered. "She wants to train me." His father's jaw tightened. "Who is she?" "Evelyn March." That name made Adrian sit back with disbelief. "You want to throw away your future for an old woman with bottles on shelves?" Theo felt the sting of that, but he didn't back away. "You build bridges," he said. "She built something too." Adrian stood up then. "Do not compare the two." The air in the room changed. Theo could hear the radiator ticking, could see the reflection of the lamp in the dark window, could feel his own pulse in his fingertips. This was no longer about a job, or even about talent. It was about what Adrian believed counted as a life. For the next few days, the house grew colder. His father spoke to him only about the academy. Theo still went to Evelyn. He cleaned bottles, labeled drawers, learned how one drop too many could ruin balance. He came home carrying new smells on his sleeves and new certainty in his chest. Then one evening, Adrian placed the acceptance packet in front of him again. "Sign it," he said. Theo looked at the paper, then at his father, and this time, he knew that one word was going to cost him everything. Theo did not touch the pen. The paper lay between them, bright under the lamp, its official seal catching the light. Adrian kept one hand flat on the table, as if he could hold the future in place by force alone. "This is a guaranteed path," he said. "People wait years for this kind of door to open." Theo looked at the form, then at the neat rows of calculations on the blueprint beside it. He knew what his father wanted him to feel: gratitude, pride, duty. Instead, all he felt was the quiet pull he had felt in Evelyn's workroom, among paper strips and dark bottles, where every small truth mattered. "I'm not signing it," he said. For a second, Adrian did not react. Then he drew in a slow breath. "Say that again?" Theo's voice shook now, but only once. "I'm not going to the academy." The chair scraped hard against the floor as Adrian stood. The sound cut through the room like metal on stone. "You would throw away your name for perfume?" "It isn't throwing it away." "To me, it is." There it was at last. Shame. Theo could see it in his father's face. Not shame for cruelty, shame for having a son who wanted a different life. Adrian pointed toward the hallway. "If you walk out to chase this foolishness, do not expect this house to keep waiting for you." Theo's chest tightened. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I am telling you," Adrian said, each word clipped and clean, "that I will not fund, bless, or pretend respect for this choice. If you refuse that place, you refuse me." The room went silent. Then Theo set the pen down, turned, and went to his room to pack one bag, while downstairs, his father did not call him back. He packed lightly because there was not much he felt he could claim: a few shirts, a notebook, one photograph of Claire that had somehow escaped the quiet clearing of her things, and, wrapped in a handkerchief at the bottom of the bag, the little jar he had guarded since childhood. When Theo came back downstairs, Adrian was still in the dining room, standing by the table with his back half turned, as if watching his son leave would make the choice too real. Theo stopped in the doorway. For one foolish second, he waited. He waited for his father to say, "Don't go," or even, "We'll speak in the morning." Nothing came. The front door shut behind him with a sound he would remember for years. Outside, the night air was damp and cold. Streetlights blurred in the wet pavement, and his fingers ached around the strap of the bag. He walked farther than he meant to, past closed shops and dark windows, until the anger wore off and only the hurt remained. That was the worst part. Not that Adrian had shouted, but that he had chosen pride without hesitation. By the time Theo reached Evelyn's street, the world had gone almost silent. Her shop window was dark, but a thin line of light showed beneath the side door. He stood there a moment, unsure whether to knock. Before he could decide, the door opened. Evelyn looked at the bag, then at his face. "So," she said quietly, "he made you choose." Theo tried to answer, but the words caught. Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze." He entered the narrow hall, breathing in wax, cedar, and old paper, and then she said something that made him stop where he was. "There's a room upstairs," she said. "If you can work, you can stay." Theo stayed. The room upstairs was small enough that he could cross it in a few steps. One narrow bed, one sloped ceiling, one window that looked over the back alley where rainwater gathered in the cracked stones. But it was warm, and after that night, warmth was no small thing. Life with Evelyn began before sunrise and ended long after the lamps were lit. She did not flatter him for being brave, and she did not comfort him for being wounded. She put him to work. He washed glass vials until his hands smelled of soap and alcohol. He copied labels in careful script. He learned that some materials stained skin for hours, while others vanished before you could trust them. He learned patience first, not glamour. When he made mistakes, Evelyn noticed at once. Again, she would say, or too much. Or, when he rushed, your nose may be gifted, but your discipline is not. Still, something inside him steadied. Every drawer he sorted, every blotter he studied, every quiet correction seemed to build a new kind of strength. At night, lying in the narrow bed, he would sometimes take out the old jar of orange blossom cream, open it once, and close it again, not out of desperation now, but out of promise. One day he told himself he would understand every note inside it. Weeks turned into months. If you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, tell me your city in the comments. And if you've ever had to defend what you were born to do, write, I choose my gift. Then, one cold afternoon, Evelyn unlocked a cabinet she had never let him touch before. Inside were thick formula books, ribbon-tied and worn soft at the edges. She placed them on the table and said, very quietly, "You're ready to see what I could not finish." Theo untied the ribbons with careful hands. The books smelled of dust, paper, and old oils that had seeped into the pages over years of use. Inside were formulas, revisions, crossed-out trials, tiny notes in Evelyn's narrow handwriting. Some pages were sharp and exact. Others looked almost argued with, as if she had fought the same problem over and refused to let it win. She opened to one section and tapped the margin. This, she said, was the house fragrance people used to come here for. Theo read the name softly. It meant nothing to the public now, but the pages underneath told another story. Layer after layer, changes in proportion. Notes added, then removed. One line circled 3 times. Another scratched out so hard it had nearly torn the paper. "What happened?" he asked. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she gave the plain answer. "My nose failed before I could finish what it needed to become." From that day on, the work changed. Theo was no longer only cleaning and sorting. Evelyn began building with him. She would place accords on strips and ask, what opens first? What turns flat? What stays after the brightness goes? Sometimes they agreed at once. Sometimes they stood in silence while he searched for the exact truth she needed. Months folded into years. His answers grew steadier. His hand learned restraint. More than once, Evelyn would listen to him, close her eyes, and say, almost to herself, "There, that's closer." Then one winter morning, Theo found her sitting very still at the table, paler than usual, one hand resting on the open formula book. She looked up at him and said, with a tired softness he had never heard before, "We may have less time than I hoped." After that morning, Evelyn wasted nothing. Her steps grew slower, but her mind seemed to sharpen even more. She spoke less about what had been and more about what must remain. If a formula failed, she no longer let it sit for another week. If Theo described a note too vaguely, she stopped him at once. "Not pleasant," she would say. "Pleasant is lazy. Tell me what it does." So he learned to answer better. He learned how brightness could deceive, how warmth could turn heavy, how one careless choice could blur an entire structure. He learned that scent was not just decoration. It could comfort, unsettle, remind, reveal. It could reach places words could not. And when he spoke now, Evelyn listened with a seriousness that told him he was no longer a boy helping in a shop. He was becoming necessary. Then, one evening, she handed him a strip and asked, "What is wrong with it?" Theo smelled it once, then again. It opened beautifully, soft citrus, powder, depth. But after a few breaths, he felt it. A hollow place, a break in the middle. "It falls away too soon," he said. "There's something missing." Evelyn nodded slowly, almost proud. "Yes, that gap is why I could never release it." A few days later, a lawyer came to the house. Theo had never seen one there before. He heard the low murmur of voices behind the closed door, the rustle of papers, the scratch of a pen. When the man finally left, Evelyn called Theo into the workroom. The air smelled of ink, old wood, and the formula book still open there. She rested her hand on the page and looked at him for a long moment. "If I don't get to finish this," she said quietly, "you will." And then she added words that made his stomach tighten. "I've already put that in writing." After that, Theo worked as if time itself were watching. Evelyn still came to the table, still corrected him, still asked for precision, but her strength faded in ways neither of them pretended not to see. Some mornings she paused before sitting down. Some evenings her hand trembled slightly over the page. And then, one gray dawn, the house was too quiet. She was gone. The silence she left behind was unlike any silence Theo had known before. Charged. Her workroom still held the smell of paper, amber, woods, and the faint trace of the last materials they had tested together. On the table lay her final note to him, only a few lines long, telling him not to chase applause, only truth. Then the will was read. Evelyn had left him the house, the formula books, and the right to complete the unfinished flagship that had once defined her name. People in the trade did not all welcome that. Some were polite and doubtful. Others were neither. To them, he was still the boy she had taken in, not the one meant to carry her legacy. So Theo answered the only way he knew how, with work. He reopened the books, rebuilt the structure, found the weakness in the heart of it, and corrected it with the patience she had taught him. When the fragrance was finally released, it did what Evelyn always said real scent must do. It reached people before they could defend themselves. Orders came first, then praise, then lines outside the shop. Years later, when the guild named him the foremost master perfumer in the country, the applause was thunderous. But the message waiting for him afterward was quiet. It was from a physician. "Your father is unwell," it said. "His memory is slipping. If there is anything you need to say, do not wait." Theo did not go to his father with awards or clippings or the title the guild had given him. He went with a small bottle wrapped in plain paper. Adrian looked older than grief had ever allowed Theo to imagine. The great engineer's hands, once so certain over lines and measurements, now rested unsteadily on a blanket across his knees. The house smelled faintly of medicine, dust, and rooms kept closed too long. When Theo stepped inside, Adrian tried to sit straighter, as if pride had survived where strength had not. They spoke only a little. Then Theo placed the bottle on the table between them. "What is this?" Adrian asked. Theo's answer was quiet. "Something I finished a long time ago." He uncapped it and touched one drop to a paper strip. At first, Adrian only frowned. Then the change came, not in his face alone, but in his whole body. His fingers tightened, his breath caught. The room that had spent years holding itself together suddenly gave way to another time. Orange blossom, soft cream, clean cotton, the warmth of skin after afternoon light. Claire. Adrian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were full. "I thought if I cleared her away," he said, voice breaking, "I could keep working. I didn't know I was clearing you away too." Theo said nothing. He did not need to. The air between them carried what neither man had known how to speak. Some things do not return through doors or photographs. Sometimes they come back on a strip of paper, and a hand finally stopped shaking long enough to remember. Later, after Theo left, Adrian opened a window for the first time in months. Fresh air moved through the room, and nothing in it felt sealed anymore. If this story stayed with you, leave your city in the comments and write, "I choose my gift." Subscribe and turn on the bell for the next story.